I'm Jennifer Pulley, and welcome to another edition of NASA 360. Today, we've got so many things lined up for you. We're going to talk about technology, we're going to talk about exploration, and we're going to talk about dinosaurs and how they're all related. But first, let's talk about where I'm standing. Get this, I'm standing inside a fort. That's right, and it's not just any fort. This is Jamestown Fort. It's the site of the first permanent English colony in what was then called the New World. Today, of course, we know it as America. Now think about this. From this starting point, people spread out all across the country and eventually populated the entire United States. So I guess we have to say that this landing spot's a pretty big deal in American history. Over time, though, the original fort that the English settlers built fell into disrepair. And believe it or not, for many years, it was lost to history. That all changed in 1996 when archaeologist Dr. Bill Kelso rediscovered the original fort. It began a whole new era of understanding what life was like for those first Jamestown settlers. For the first time, they had proof. Using old writings, drawings, and now a handy trowel for digging, Dr. Kelso and his team discovered where the old fort was, and they began excavating the artifacts. To date, he and his team have found over 1 million artifacts from the original fort, and they expect to find many more in the next few years. In a little while, we'll catch up with Dr. Kelso and dig a little deeper into the history of Jamestown. But first, do you know the difference between an archaeologist and a paleontologist? Well, let's see. They both dig in the ground looking for things from the past, right? Well, it's the type of things they're looking for that make them different. You see, archaeology is the science of understanding human cultures, while paleontology is the study of prehistoric life forms. So basically, archaeologists spend their time trying to understand human history, while paleontologists generally look for fossils from before human history, like dinosaur bones. Got it? Luckily for archaeologists and paleontologists, tons of help is now coming from NASA. How? Well, one of the ways is through the use of remote sensing techniques. Remote sensing? Well, in the broadest sense, it's the use of a device to collect information without actually physically touching the object. Now, a great example of a remote sensing device we use every single day, our eyes. Think about it. You can detect objects around you without physically touching them. You simply use your detectors, or your eyes, to see the object, gather information about it. You're using remote sensing. There are many forms of NASA-sponsored remote sensing devices that are being used to help in archaeology and paleontology. Like, for example, there's something called ground-penetrating radar. This unique type of radar system can actually see objects in the ground without anyone having to dig them up. By using this, in combination with aerial photography and historical documents, NASA can help give researchers a much better indication of where to dig, what to preserve, and what areas to avoid. Satellites are another type of remote sensing tool being used by NASA researchers to help archaeologists and paleontologists. In fact, NASA archaeologist Dr. Tom Seaver has been using satellite data to help us understand why the Mayan civilization in Guatemala collapsed and how current populations may be able to prevent future disaster. Let me try to break it down for you. Between the 3rd and 9th century, the Mayan civilization in Central America flourished. But after about the 9th century, they collapsed, leaving archaeologists few clues as to why this once mighty civilization disappeared. This is where NASA comes in. Our remote sensing satellites can detect even small changes within the electromagnetic spectrum. So sand, cultivated soil, vegetation, and rocks each have distinctive spectral signatures, which are easily distinguished from each other. So, archaeologists can use info from the remote sensing satellites to quickly target specific areas of interest, then send teams to that area to validate the findings. Dr. Seaver and his team have already found several previously undiscovered sites and feel confident that they know where others are, thanks to NASA's remote sensing satellites. That is how NASA is helping researchers find old ruins. But remote sensing satellites are also helping us understand why the Mayan civilization may have disappeared. Today, the Patan rainforest in Guatemala is covered with trees and is not heavily populated, but it was not like this during the peak of the Mayan civilization. In fact, during that time, this region had a population of about 2,000 people per square mile. which is about the same as current-day Los Angeles. With a population that large, the Mayas had to farm huge areas of land. To do this, they employed a technique called slash and burn, which eventually destroyed virtually every tree for hundreds of miles. Computer models show that as the trees disappeared, so did the rain, which caused temperatures to increase by 5 to 6 degrees. All of these shifts may have caused malnutrition and disease, which in turn contributed to its collapse. This information is especially important for us today because slash and burn techniques are once again being used in the areas that were once Mayan strongholds. Understanding what happened to the Mayas may dissuade current generations of farmers from following the same destructive path. So, as you can see, NASA technology is being used for a lot more than just to help us in space. It's being used to help save lives back here on Earth, too. Hey, in a little bit, we'll swing back out here to Jamestown to talk with Dr. Kelso. But first, let's head to North Dakota. Johnny Alonzo's there to see what a mummified dinosaur and NASA have in common. Hang on tight, you're watching NASA 360.
Hey, how's it going? Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen a real dinosaur? And I'm not talking about one of those dinosaurs you might see in the movies or even the skeletons in the museums. I'm talking about a real dinosaur with skin, muscle, and bones. Yeah, it might be hard nowadays considering the fact that dinosaurs lived, what, hundreds of millions of years ago. But what if I told you that researchers found a dinosaur just like that? Would you believe it? Well, if you said no, you better start believing. Because a few years ago, researchers found an actual mummified dinosaur that was still intact from the skin, to cartilage, to muscle. A mummified hadrosaur named Dakota is so unique in its discovery that it's changing what researchers thought they knew about dinosaurs. I rolled out to Bismarck, North Dakota to speak with my buddy Dr. John Hoganson about this amazing discovery and to find out how NASA is helping unearth more clues.
All right.
Oh, wow, are you kidding me?
Yeah, this is the
This is so cool.
this is the tail section of the duckbill dinosaur called Dakota, and it's being prepared here at the North Dakota Geological Survey Preparation Laboratory here at the Heritage Center in Bismarck.
This is something else. Wow. So, Doc, how was this dinosaur found?
Well, this fossil was found in 1999 by Tyler Leeson down in Marmarth, North Dakota, which is in the southwest corner of the state. He was only a sophomore in high school at the time, but was out exploring for fossils actually on his uncle's property down in the Badlands. Now, this is a hadrosaur called Edmontosaurus. That's a scientific name for this particular species of dinosaur. Hadrosaurs were duckbill dinosaurs. They were a group of dinosaurs that were referred to as duckbill dinosaurs because their snouts were compressed. And it's very similar to a modern duck.
So, what is so unique about this fossil?
Well, you know, generally paleontologists, when we're out exploring for fossils, will only find individual bones or fragments of jaws or things like that. Okay. This particular dinosaur called Dakota is not only a complete skeleton, but it's very unique because the skin is actually preserved on this animal. So the entire skeleton appears to be wrapped in the skin that it was enclosed in. This is called a mummified dinosaur, but it's not a mummy in the sense of what we generally think about, like an Egyptian mummy that has been embalmed for preservation. The skin on this animal is actually preserved because it's been replaced by a mineral called siderite, which is an iron carbonate kind of mineral, which is very hard and has preserved the skin.
All right, so how did NASA get involved with this dinosaur discovery? Well, researchers needed a way to scan through all the layers of rock to see all the dinosaur, and since this thing weighs about 10 tons, they needed a really, really big scanner.
Well, you know, when we usually find these fossils in the field, we generally just find the bones, the skeletons, and it was determined early on during the excavation process that this particular dinosaur was covered in skin. So it was decided to take these skeleton blocks out still entombed in the rock. So big blocks of rocks were removed. And At that point, it was decided that the best technology to use to determine the position of the bones in the rock and the completeness of the skeleton was to use CAT scan technologies, and that's where NASA was asked if they could help with this. And it's been a very good approach, because with this tail block that we're working on right now, we, through the CAT scan technology, are able to know where the bones are before we actually start digging through the rock matrix.
Luckily for these guys, NASA operates the largest CT scanner in the world. Located at a Boeing facility in Canoga Park, California, this scanner's first priority is to inspect large space shuttle parts. Well, the task for Dakota was not all that different. So they loaded Dakota on a truck and shipped it off to California. When it arrived, the scanner was able to penetrate the dense iron carbonate that surrounded the dinosaur's tail section. And right away, researchers saw bones, tissue, and cartilage.
Well, since I've been a paleontologist, which has been a few years, there's been a lot of technological changes and advancements that have really helped the science. In addition to the CAT scan technology that we've been talking about here, there's a lot of remote sensing type of technologies that are available to us now, global position systems, mapping, LiDAR kinds of laser mapping, various other kinds of technologies that assist us in the field actually locating and positioning the fossil finds, because it's very important to us to know where in the rock column the fossil is found, and also, of course, the geographic position of the fossil. Sure. We also use CAT scans for determining the bone structures of skulls, and also the size of brain cases in skulls, fossil skulls that have been found. So technology is used extensively now in paleontology. We're preparing this for exhibit. The tail and one of the arms will be prepared and put on exhibit here at the North Dakota Heritage Center, which is open to the public. So we plan to have it here for quite some time if people are interested in coming and seeing it.
Good, absolutely. Well, Doctor, thank you so much for having us here at the North Dakota Heritage Center.
Really good to have you here.
Most definitely. Thank you. Hey, in a little bit, I'm going to tell you how NASA's bringing history to life on the Lewis and Clark Trail. So don't go anywhere. It's coming right up. You're watching NASA 360.
Okay, so the first English settlers landed here in Jamestown in 1607, but the first years, oh, they were rough. In fact, for many years, there was question as to whether this small fort would actually survive. There was starvation and a lot of sickness. But thanks to some local Indians and some resupply from England, this small little fort held on and it began to flourish. In fact, from 1612 to 1698, Jamestown was the capital of the whole country. That changed when a fire swept through the State House and it forced the capital to be moved to Williamsburg. Just a few years later, Jamestown was gone, both physically and in memory. Over the centuries, people believe that the old fort and all of its artifacts had actually washed away into the James River. But that all changed in 1994, when the Association for the Preservation of Virginia Antiquities, or for short, the APVA, commissioned an archaeological dig in the area where the original fort was thought to be. Why? Well, APVA lead archaeologist Dr. Bill Kelso believed the original fort had not been washed away at all. He had a hunch that he knew where to find the fort, and this old church had something to do with it.
The reason that I started digging where I did was that the church, there's a church tower here that's the only original above ground part of Jamestown, 17th century, and the church was originally in the midst of the fort. Right. One of the records said this, so well, it ought to be around here somewhere, so starting near the church was the key. And it was an area that had never really been looked at before, ironically enough. It's high ground. It's really made sense now that we know where the fort is.
Can you walk me through the kind of the excavation process, the recording? We were talking a little bit about the technology, and then where do the artifacts go from there?
Well, artifacts are removed from their soil, and once we understand the context, we call it, where they're found, they're taken to a lab and they're washed, and then some of these, like these iron objects, would have to be conserved. Some things, probably 1 or 2% of what we have here will go on exhibit. We have a museum here, and there are other traveling exhibits and other things that we do just to tell the Jamestown story.
Would you believe that?
How are we going to do this?
Oh my God! It's all metal down to here. That's why it's
all
lost.
together. That's Lord Delaware's. That comes over to Lord Delaware.
Dr. Kelso, how long have you been an archaeologist?
Well, I started probably 1607, something like that.
Wow, you look great.
Thank you very much.
Wait, over 400 years old. Gosh.
It's been a while, 45 years, I guess I would say. Yeah.
All right, so in that time, in those 45 years, tell me, what have you seen, what changes have you seen, technological advances?
Well, the
archaeology.
major technological advance, you would think that we would have invented X-ray vision, and we'd save a lot of digging.
Right.
But that hasn't happened. There are certain machines that can give you some reading below ground without digging, remote sensing. But what I think the breakthrough has been in recording, the record of archaeology, because archaeology, I think in the past, is something that's viewed as destructive. But now we have the technology through a GIS program that we can record almost in 3 dimensions, and we're close. And if you can record in 3 dimensions, then you can actually replicate the site again digitally, and re-look at it. That still doesn't replace just blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, it's just down, it's digging, it's stooping, it's using our main instrument here is just this small shovel, and it takes a long time to dig out a hole like this with something like this, and but we have to do that.